Hi, I'm PK O'Flaherty. This is my thesis presentation for the Master's in Science of Data Science program at CUNY on taxation equity for New York City co-ops. New York City collects almost half of its budget from property taxes. The issue is that the city's ordinary property owners don't know if they are being overtaxed, and if they are being overtaxed, that harm is so abstract and technical, there's very little they can do about it. That's called low legal salience. That's when if someone can't name how they're being injured, they can't use the courts to address that injury. An example of an injury would be if sophisticated owners are more likely to be able to appeal their property taxes than unsophisticated owners, then sophisticated owners have effectively shifted that property tax burden onto less sophisticated owners. So imagine New York only has two buildings. They're the same type. They have 50 units each. They're across the street from each other in the same neighborhood. So they should have the same taxes, and they do. But building A appeals its taxes and is able to reduce its assessed market value in half. And so next year, when the city is trying to collect the same amount in taxes, they have to set the property tax percentage higher so that they're still able to collect a dollar. From building B's perspective, property taxes raised from 2.5% to 3.33%. And they don't realize that their property tax increase was 100% because their neighbor is paying less in taxes. We actually live in this ridiculous example. Renters pay 4.5 to 6 times as much property taxes as homeowners do. So you would think that renters don't pay property tax, but their rent covers their landlord's property tax bills. And so 2/3 of their rent is probably property tax. So this one makes it harder that they'll ever be able to save to become property owners themselves, and is an example of how tax inequity affects a broad range of people. The New York system is different classes. So brownstones, small family homes, are roughly 45% of 50% of the the market value in New York City, but only pay 15% of the taxes, whereas class 2 is roughly 25% of the market value for properties, but we pay 45% of the property taxes. So in effect, someone living in a brownstone is being subsidized by people living in apartment complexes. How can co-op boards and residents, especially those without sophisticated resources, know if their building may have a good case for appeal? In that example with the two buildings, if we were to run a model, since they have the same inputs for both buildings, they should have the same output. And then so we can look at the difference between the expected tax and the actual tax to determine whether the model thinks that someone's being overtaxed or undertaxed. So we're going to try and do that on a large scale, and we did that by taking data from the New York City Department of Finance, and the New York City City Planning. Combined that, focused our efforts to co-ops with more than 10 units, and for a linear model, looked at estimated market value. For a nonlinear model, we found that size was leaking into the results too much, and so we changed the target for the nonlinear model to be estimated market value per gross square foot. Additionally, we took the coordinates north-south and shifted it 29 degrees, tilted it 29 degrees to the east to line up with the Manhattan street grid. That way the model is able to take advantage of the natural boundaries between avenues and streets. The linear model, the coefficients largely lined up with the Department of Finance's stated methods. When we graph the residuals, we see that for lower property values, you're as equally likely to be above or below on target, so more likely to have high or negative residuals. But for more expensive, there's the ceiling on being overassessed, and then a ceiling on being underassessed even just a little bit. This reveals that New York City has a regressive property tax structure that's not under debate. But what's interesting is this is based on the log of the market value. That has a base of 2.72. What if we were to take a higher base, say 4, then maybe the heteroscedasticity would apply across the board. And in a way, that base could be a measure of how regressive the property tax structure is in New York City. So we may never get to a proportional tax system or a progressive tax system, but that could be a measure for, are we making progress towards a less regressive tax structure? Also, if we look at building classes, the coefficients, we can see that class D4, that's where I live, the pictured building, it's the highest. And those are residential buildings with elevators. Class C5, retail, factories, a lot of the factory space are no more, and they've been converted into lofts. So even though they've transitioned to residential usage, they still keep this building class designation of C5 and pay less in taxes. Our nonlinear model performed really well, and the two most important features were location. So I've shown a map of the Manhattan North on the left and then the East West on the right. So for the streets, the tax premium is between Houston and 82nd, drops off significantly to 1/16th and is low above. And for the avenues, the tax premium is between 5th Avenue and Lexington. It drops off to 2nd Avenue. And going west, it drops off significantly at 6th, stays even for 7th and 8th, drops significantly to 9th, again to 10th, and there's a little bump on the Hudson. So this is just in general, but there are other markers of location. The number 2 most important feature is School District 6. So northern Manhattan on the west side is School District 6. That's Inwood, Washington Heights, Hamilton Heights, and that's relatively more prosperous than the northern Manhattan to the east. And so that school district becomes a valuable carve out that's able to make this map of the streets and the avenues more complex. When we graph the residuals, we see that there's low residuals in the Upper East Side. One possibility could be that area is relatively more expensive, and so they are less likely to be overassessed. So the residuals tend to be smaller there. Another thing could be there's more even development there. And like when I lived in Washington Heights, the building to my right was without gas for 4 years, and my building to the left had bulletproof glass and was a luxury rental. So we used my building to check for the residuals, and we found that the assessed market value is 10% higher than what our model would predict. And so it looks like there is some evidence to suggest we may be overpaying and could pursue an appeal. So both models are good. I think that the linear model is probably not the best for finding the residuals because I don't believe that multiplicative effect of the coefficients should apply across the entire range of all possible properties. However, it could still be useful, especially if you were at the Department of Finance using these different models to assess whether you're applying your procedures fairly, consistently, and looking for any discrepancies that you can research. Also, this is an example of a low salience societal harm that's being brought to light. I'm always so impressed with conspiracy theorists. They're able to find these low salient societal harms, but I just wish they could find real ones like tax inequity or tax loopholes or turning privatization that turns human rights into human privileges. And if as a society we could find more real low salient societal harms and work on them, it would be a better place. Thank you.